Meet Fetty, the boy-crazy, power-mad despot who thinks love is pain, and Cleo, the confident devil-may-care space pirate that rides the divine wind, and Michelle, a freedom-fighting prince hoping to save the galaxy from tyranny and endless war. And this is the extremely obvious bromantic subtext of Glass Fleet. A fierce rivalry can be a healthy thing. I've seen shows revolve around them completely, but there's beef on side energy, and then there's whatever the fuck's going on with Cleo and Vetty. This is them literally seconds after crossing paths for the first time. There's no inciting incident here. They weren't looking for each other. This is completely out of the blue, and even they don't know why they've whipped their swords out. They both came to this place to learn about their destiny from the Fate Machine, and must have just known by pure instinct that this guy must be it. This fight goes on until their clothes explode off. The pink dot. Please refer to my man-knit mockumentary for more information. And it only ends when Vetty Shota Boytoy pulls a drive-by in a spaceship. Yes, really.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Don't worry, they'll be fine. After the first scuffle, they each become a habit the other just can't kick. And even more so than his endless quest for power, an opportunity to stick his sword in Cleo is what gets our prick antagonist Vetty out of bed in the morning. I know I'm going to frame a lot of this show's events from Vetty's point of view, but their obsession is very mutual. And if you can't already tell, the plot will grind to a halt so they can throw hands and quote Hamlet at each other. They run into one another purely by chance in episode 17, and the tension is thick.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Everyone around them knows they're about to pop off, and they're gearing up for a fight, and have to be physically restrained and forced to pass each other without violence. Afterwards, they get all sulky and despondent because they can't be in the presence of the man they hate. They act like they got blue-balled. Honestly, nothing about Vetty and Cleo's interactions are subtle, and their fights tend to be laden with the most on-the-nose sexual innuendo. There's even a too perfectly timed to be a coincidence golden shower when the battle is over in episode 12. Because Glass Fleet just makes subtlety bite the curb. Though granted, you'd find Glass Fleet likes to use rain as a metaphor for catharsis and washing away complicated feels. But still, that rain did not have to be gold, Jesus. The horny on main energy even poked its into the space battles. The super unique glass warship Cleo pilots has a special super move, then firing a tramp stamp onto its target before ramming into it. Normally the ship will pass right through what it's being aimed at, but when it comes to Vetty's battle station, it gets stuck, and Vetty won't let Cleo pull out. Yes, really. For all the camp, space battles, or over-the-top aesthetics, the show's got a dark side. If you haven't already guessed, Vetty had a f***ed up childhood. I wish I could say this was the worst of it. After his, spoilers, potentially royal parents are slain, he was taken in by some wealthy nobles, who laid hands on him. There's one thing I've noticed, is that many male anime characters who grow up to be gay or pansexual are shown having had the misfortune of being, we'll say, introduced to sex by men when they were still minors. Looking back on my years of anime watching, this has come up alarmingly often. Sure, Vetty leans into his role as the family bicycle and survives, and eventually even gets his smirking revenge on both parents, and then burns his mother down. But the ripples from Vetti's traumatic childhood are felt throughout the story, and it informs his entire personality. He's a sexually manipulative, power-hungry narcissist who doesn't understand love that isn't accompanied by pain or anger. And the violent yandere way he interacts with the three most important men in his life is definitely inspired by his adopted father. Vetti's twisted feelings and his thirst for, we'll say, power is low-key driving this show. Changed my mind. There were very few women in Glass Fleet, even fewer with any actual speaking roles. Vetti and the Space Pope's daughter, Rachel. They're in the early stages of your standard political marriage to keep the peace in an anime that's mostly diplomacy, betrayals, and space battles. Anyway, there's a staggering amount of screen time dedicated to just how few Vetti gives about his relationship with his space waifu. Granted, he's just using her as a stepping stone to become Emperor of the Space Holy Empire or whatever, but he's a dude, and dudes be horny, yo. Yet Vetti refuses to lay actual pipe on her. And every one of Rachel's attempts to get into Vetti's pantaloons ends in failure. Vetti even imagines Cleo's face when she's kissing him. She flings herself at him, but she's only ever met with boredom and disgust. And then he can't take it any longer and goes to rinse his mouth out, leaving her crying on the floor. I pointed out BL husbandos being bored or cold to their would-be waifus in the past, but Vetti's the worst offender so far. In episode 16, Rachel plucks up the courage to try again when she crawls into his bed and he is ice cold to her. She's met with the equivalent of, "Bitch, could you not?" before Vetti just leaves. Will he go sleep on the royal couch or whatever? No. He waves his sword around while thinking about Cleo. On top of brushing off Rachel's affection constantly, Vetti very publicly spends all of his time with Ralph, the jailbait Bishonen glued to his hip in most scenes. Their age difference is, to put it mildly, problematic, yet no one says a word about it, ever. Ralph is just as enamored with Vetti as Rachel is, but only he gets to consistently enjoy anything resembling a, and I can't believe I'm saying this, healthy relationship with him. Vetti confides in Ralph and is more affectionate, gentler, and more open with him than anyone else in the show. Rachel gets furiously jealous of all the time they spend together. And Ralph gets pouty whenever Vetti's with, well, anyone else. But unbeknownst to both of them, Vetti doesn't dream of Space Pirate Senpai. In case you forgot, Michelle is the freedom fighter prince trying to carve out some peace for anyone dissatisfied with the Holy Space Empire's dictatorship. Oh, and trying not to die in the process. Michelle, however, is not really Michelle, but his sister, disguised as him for the sake of the mission after his disappearance. Not Michelle's inconsistent gender was actually a bit of a problem in this show. Not because there's anything wrong with gender fluidity, of course. We see that in anime all the time now. But because it seemed like the franchise couldn't always commit to its own homoerotic narrative. Despite how much I've prattled on about hot mess Petty Vetti in this video, the first ship out of the harbor was Michelle and Cleo. It was an us against the world kind of setup, after Michelle gets Cleo to help the Resistance fight Vetti's space empire. It looked like there was a nice little bromance blossoming between them behind all the battles and politics. Even Imro, who's nursing a one-sided crush on Cleo, thinks she's already lost to Michelle. Now Michelle is fully committed and plans to live the rest of his life as a man. But once Cleo finds out he's a she, their dynamic doesn't actually change. If anything, Michelle is relieved that Cleo seems to accept her as both Michelle and Racine. And after a heart-to-heart, they actually bone in episode 23.
俺のポケットに入ったんだろう。だったら全部俺が受け止めてやるぜ。
Funny enough, Cleo uses the same in my pocket line on Vedi minutes after meeting him.
お前も入れてやろうか。俺のポケットに。
Now I promised y'all a love triangle, so what about Vedi and Michelle? Well, years before meeting Cleo, Teen Twunk Vedi was super into the real Michelle.
美しい。
A flashback takes us to this scene.
素敵だよミシェル君ミシェル・ボルマンいつか必ず私のものにしてみせるよ
There's nothing ambiguous about any of that. Vedi plans to lay some strong pipe on Michael and seize his property. To this day, Vedi's still obsessed with the idea that he's the only one that can conquer Michelle.
君も彼同様我が刻印を受けたまえ待っておいでミシェル後でゆっくり君を味わわせてもらうよ
Since he doesn't know the real Michelle is missing, Vedi's feelings are just aimed at his cross-dressing twin now. In episode 14, Vedi seizes an opportunity for conquest after luring Michelle 2.0 into a diplomatic alliance and roofying his wine. Mind you, Vedi commits this date thinking Michelle is male.
憎みたまえそれこそが愛だ
He quickly finds out her true gender, and it doesn't go so well.
何をした何をしたと聞いている
君にはもう用はない消えてくれ
I get we should just think of Michelle as male, and that his gender really isn't supposed to matter, as everyone's favorite wine aunt, the Baroness of Bordeaux, will attest. But the he, she, them ambiguity goes from kinda woke to looking like a backup plan in case the BL subplot Glass Fleet's hitting us over the head with didn't wow fans. For an anime trying really hard to come across as normal, it's interesting that they made the MC's main romantic options a trans man, one very underage girl, and this lunatic. Even though Michelle's character arc is about coming to terms with and accepting both her masculine and feminine sides, we know Michelle's biologically female. So now producers can always backtrack and say, see, she was a woman all along. The main characters you've been rooting for were totally normal, while the antagonist becomes the stereotypically gay-coded villain for them to defeat, so the heteronormative status quo can be restored. So the original broadcast version was chopped to bits, and once I got the DVD box set, I saw why. For something rated PG-13, it occasionally got a little too weird for primetime TV. So the more unsavory parts were omitted to make it more palatable to teen viewers in 2006. And you know how animators will remove censors or redraw entire scenes for the Blu-ray release? Well, they did that with the story too. Like, I once wasted hours of my life looking for a scene where Alba and Dio go to talk to Dio's old dad together in Buddy Complex, only to realize the DVD Blu-ray version cut that scene, and now it's just Dio arguing with his dad alone.
なあディオ、なんだ俺から親父さんに話してみようか。お前が
Because that guess who's coming to dinner moment made the show being one big gay allegory even more obvious. Alba, of course, playing the part of Sidney Poitier. Unsurprisingly, by the end, the cringy yet sweet bromance with Ralph ends abruptly. Rachel straight up murders him in a jealous rage after being cucked for the last time. So it's the fan, Rachel becomes the space pope, dethroning her father after he tried to seize power earlier. There's a citizen uprising, the titular Glass Fleet finally shows up, and there's a massive system-wide battle. A battle Cleo merrily skips out of to have a bro down with Vedi the instant he sees him, because of course he does. At this point, Vedi is dying from a Soleil-induced illness, and he only has a clutch of subordinates still loyal to him or alive. So there's not much reason to fight Cleo anymore narrative-wise. But their beef was never about the mission, it's fun. It was about being in each other's faces as often as possible because they don't know how to feel their feelings. There's hints dropped in episodes 17 and 19 vaguely implying that they might be related, before the anime launches into an episode-long flashback about their charismatic dad, featuring his own lifelong, then somewhat tragic bromance decades prior. Clearly the apple didn't fall far from the BL tree.
ありがとう、カルド。私は今ほどホーユーをありがたいと思ったことはない。
Then there's the bit about the Soleil, or the magic substance inside their bodies, is what resonates and drew them together in the first place. But more than anything, it turns out it was Cleo and Vetty who were the fabled two-headed hawk meant to unite and save the galaxy. The prophecy the show kept banging on about, and not Vetty and Rachel like we were told during Vetty's attempt at a hetero narrative in episode 11. As the gods of war and gods of love engineered by a higher power, Cleo and Vetty aren't just brothers, but more like one entity carved into two at birth, and destined to become one again. It's complicated. This is why they were so drawn to each other, and not the far simpler, obvious, and less pure explanation. Glass Fleet was actually an anime original with no manga to go off of, so there's a bunch of exhausting, convoluted plot points served up for no other reason than to make everything that happens between them less problematic, so they fight. But Vetty gets the upper hand and fatally stabs Cleo for realsies this time. And afterwards they're magically transported to some sort of glowing limbo to chat. Naked, in canoes, you know, like brothers do. The show finally stops bothering to hand wave away the gay, and have Cleo and Vetty chat each other up before literally becoming one being. The process of two dudes becoming one person in mind or body is definitely a BL flavored plot point you've seen before. And how do they accomplish this? If you guessed Cleo pulling his own heart out of his chest and handing it to Vetty, you'd be right. And honestly, I don't think they could have made the BL message any clearer.